Celebrate the day, the spirits guide our way.
At the far edge of the village, where the last compound gave way to wild earth and tangled roots, stood a place no child dared wander toward and no adult approached without purpose. It was called Muo, the House of Spirits. The path leading to it was narrow and worn, yet strangely avoided. Even goats refused to graze near it, and birds rarely perched on the ancient trees that circled its clearing. The air there felt different, thick, watchful, as though something unseen lingered between the rustling leaves and the silent red soil. The shrine itself was built of mud walls darkened by years of smoke and sacrifice. Its roof sagged slightly under the weight of time, yet it never collapsed. At its entrance hung strings of cowries and charms, swaying gently even when there was no wind. Inside, shadows lived permanently, broken only by thin streaks of light that slipped through cracks in the walls. And within those shadows stood the gods. Tall wooden figures, carved with stern faces and hollow eyes, lined the inner space. Some held staffs, others bowls. Their bodies were stained with oil, blood, and chalk, evidence of countless rituals performed over generations. No one looked at them for too long. It was said that if you stared into their eyes, they would see something inside you, something you could not hide. The villagers believed the shrine was alive. Not alive like a person, but alive in the way fire is alive, silent, dangerous, unpredictable. It was a place where the physical and the spiritual touched, where the living could speak to what they could not see. Children were warned about it from the moment they could understand words. "Do not go near Muo," mothers would say, their voices low and serious. "The gods do not like careless footsteps," fathers added. "If you offend them," the elders would whisper, "they will not shout, they will act." Stories filled the village. Stories of men who disrespected the shrine and fell ill without reason, of women who mocked the gods and lost everything they had, of strangers who wandered too close and were never seen again. Whether these stories were true or not did not matter. Fear made them real. So the shrine remained untouched, respected, and avoided, except on sacred days. Because no matter how much they feared it, the villagers still needed the gods. And the gods, they believed, needed to be fed. On every Afor market day, before the sun fully stretched across the sky, the village began to stir with a different kind of purpose. Women woke earlier than usual, their wrappers tied tightly around their waists as they moved between hearth and storage, selecting only the best of what they had. Yams were washed and roasted until their scent filled the air. Chickens were slaughtered carefully, their blood collected and treated with reverence. Fresh palm wine was tapped at dawn, still sweet and foamy. Nothing given to the gods was ever ordinary. Men gathered in quiet groups, speaking in low tones as though even their voices needed permission to exist that morning. The elders dressed in clean white cloth, their bodies marked with chalk, symbols of purity and respect. Children were warned to stay back, to watch from a distance, to learn but never interfere. Then, as the first light settled fully on the land, the procession began. They walked slowly toward Muo, each step measured, each breath controlled. No one laughed, no one joked. Even the stubborn ones, the ones who feared nothing in the village, lowered their eyes as they approached the sacred ground. At the entrance of the shrine, they stopped. The priest stepped forward. He was a man both feared and respected, his presence heavy with something deeper than age. When he spoke, his voice did not sound entirely like his own. It carried a weight that seemed borrowed from somewhere unseen. He raised his staff. The murmuring stopped instantly. Then the chants began. Low at first, almost like a hum, rising gradually into words that twisted through the air like smoke. The language was ancient, older than the youngest tree in the forest, older than the oldest man in the village. Few understood it fully, yet all believed in it. The offerings were laid carefully before the carved figures inside the shrine. Yams arranged neatly, fowl placed with care. Palm wine poured slowly into sacred bowls. Kola nuts broken with ritual precision. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was careless. Each act carried meaning. Each movement carried belief. When everything had been placed, the priest stepped back and lifted his hands slightly, as though presenting the feast to unseen guests. "The gods have been fed," he declared. And that was that. No one waited to see the gods eat. No one lingered to watch what would happen next. It was not their place. One by one, the villagers turned and left the shrine behind, their faces calm but their hearts relieved. They had done what was required. They had shown respect. They had fulfilled their duty. Behind them, the shrine returned to silence. The food remained, untouched, waiting, and as always, no one questioned it. Because in the minds of the villagers, the gods did not need to be seen eating. It was enough to believe that they did. Among the villagers, there was a boy who belonged to no one and no place. He had no father, no mother, no clan to claim him, and therefore no name. They called him Nwata Nwegiaha, the child without a name. He had arrived mysteriously, or so the elders said. Some whispered he was the last of a family wiped out in a distant war. Others claimed he was left at the village square as a newborn, wrapped in rags, crying under the hot sun. No one knew for certain. From the beginning, life had been hard for him. The villagers were wary of him, offering pity but never warmth. He slept where he could, under the eaves of abandoned huts, beneath the open sky, or in the shadows of granaries at night. Hunger was his constant companion, gnawing at his belly, whispering desperate schemes. He scavenged from trash heaps, picked fallen fruits from trees, and sometimes begged silently, with eyes that asked more than his mouth could speak. The children teased him, the adults ignored him, and the elders tolerated his presence only because they feared speaking ill of the orphaned. Yet, despite his poverty and loneliness, there was something about him that drew attention. Not admiration, not love, but a peculiar curiosity. People would sometimes notice the way he watched them, quiet, calculating, patient. He learned quickly who gave more, who hid less, and who had food that could be snatched without notice. And it was hunger that guided him, shaping his small hands and sharp eyes, making him fearless of things that scared others. Hunger whispered ideas that morality and fear could not silence. It was this hunger that one morning led him to Ulomuo. From the edge of the clearing, he watched the villagers go about their ritual, laying offerings before the gods. His eyes darted between the trays of food and the silent wooden figures, and a question formed in his mind that no one had ever asked aloud. Why do the gods leave food behind and never eat? Hunger urged him closer, and the boy took the first step toward the forbidden. That step would change everything, though no one knew it yet. The boy crouched behind a clump of tall grass, his small frame pressed low to the ground. The scent of roasted yam and fresh palm wine drifted toward him, making his stomach twist with a sharp ache. He had watched the villagers many times, learning their routines, their chants, the exact moments when the priest lifted his hands and declared the offerings made. Each time he had stayed hidden, waiting. But today, hunger roared louder than caution. It was a constant whisper turned into a scream inside his belly. The smell of cooked food, the sight of neatly arranged yams, roasted chicken, and bowls of sweet palm wine. It was unbearable. He knew the stories, that the gods could punish those who touched what was meant for them. He had heard of men struck down by fever, women who lost children, strangers who disappeared without a trace. The warnings had been woven into the lullabies mothers sang, into the elders' stern glances, into the very soil beneath his feet. Yet hunger spoke a language all its own. It whispered, "Food is food. If they do not eat, it belongs to someone. And I am someone." He shifted his weight, eyes darting to the towering figures inside the shrine. The gods stared back with hollow eyes that seemed both empty and all-seeing. His heart hammered. His hands itched to reach out. His mouth watered. For a long moment, he simply watched, frozen between fear and desire. The villagers had left. The priest had returned to his hut. The clearing was quiet except for the wind stirring the trees and the occasional rustle of a bird. And then, a daring thought struck him. What if they do nothing? Hunger strengthened him. Fear faltered. He stood up slowly, every muscle tense. He took a step forward, then another. The red earth crunched softly beneath his bare feet. The carved gods loomed closer, silent and unmoving, as if daring him to continue. The boy took one final deep breath, heart hammering in his chest, and crossed the threshold of the shrine. Inside, the air was thick with incense and smoke, heavy and almost suffocating. Shadows danced across the walls as the thin morning light slipped through cracks in the mud. The wooden figures towered above him, their carved expressions stern, unyielding. He froze. His small hands trembled. His mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed to run. And yet, the smell of food pulled him forward. He crouched, grabbed a piece of roasted yam, and ran, fast, silent, desperate. Outside, he pressed the yam to his lips and bit into it. Warmth spread through his body, a brief, fiery relief. For the first time in his life, he had eaten without shame, without waiting, without begging. And nothing happened. No thunder cracked the sky. No shadow fell upon him. No voice shouted his name. No invisible hand struck him down. He froze, disbelief washing over him. Nothing. Hunger softened into awe and awe into daring. The first taste of forbidden food had changed him forever. The boy did not sleep that night. He lay under a leafless tree at the edge of the village, staring at the stars as if expecting them to fall and strike him down for what he had done. His hands still smelled of roasted yam, and every bite had seemed to echo in the empty shrine, as if the wooden gods had noticed and chose to remain silent. Morning came, but with it no punishment, no sickness, no fire, no spirit of the forest hunting him. The village awoke, and life continued as though nothing had happened. Curiosity mingled with hunger. He thought of the sweet smell of palm wine, the rich roasted chicken, the kola nuts neatly broken on the priest's tray. He remembered how he had felt alive, for the first time, after eating without fear. The very next market day he returned. His steps were cautious now, measured, but his heart pounded with anticipation. He lingered near the clearing, watching the villagers come and go, observing the placement of every offering, memorizing every detail. When the villagers left, he crept inside once more. The gods loomed in their silent authority, taller than ever, their hollow eyes unyielding. Yet he no longer hesitated. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the trays of food, and took more than a single yam this time. Roasted chicken, tender and rich, was his first conquest. He even dared a small sip of palm wine, careful not to spill a drop. His stomach groaned in delight as he stuffed himself with the offerings, and for a moment, he felt untouchable, free from the hunger that had always haunted him. Afterward, he paused, his eyes sweeping the silent figures. They remained unmoving, watching, or so he imagined. He swallowed hard and whispered to the empty air, "You do nothing. I am alive. You are nothing." And yet, the boy fled again, faster than before, in case the gods suddenly decided otherwise. That night, he expected the earth to swallow him. He imagined the forest's shadows creeping into his hut to drag him away. He lay awake, listening to every rustle of leaves, every distant crow, waiting for some consequence. But still, nothing came. Days passed. Weeks passed. The boy returned again and again, each time bolder, taking more, daring more. Every stolen bite taught him that the god's silence was a kind of permission. Each successful theft strengthened his courage, carving a place for him in the shadows of the village, unseen yet persistent. The first theft had begun as an act of desperation. It had become something else entirely, power. A power that came not from strength or skill, but from the audacity to defy the unseen and live. That night, after his second daring theft, the boy could not find sleep. He lay on the cold, cracked earth beneath the eaves of a deserted hut, the taste of roasted chicken still lingering in his mouth. His small body trembled, not from hunger this time, but from anticipation. All through the night, he imagined the consequences. He pictured the gods stirring to life, wooden arms swinging down to strike him. He imagined fire leaping from the carved figure's eyes, the wind screaming through the trees, and the forest itself closing in to punish him. He held his breath whenever a branch snapped in the darkness, certain that it was the hand of divine retribution. His ears picked up every distant howl, every rustle of leaves, every soft footfall in the village paths. His mind painted horrors more vivid than any he had ever known. But dawn came. The first rays of sunlight slanted through the hut's cracks. The village stirred, and life continued with its usual rhythm. No plague fell upon him. No fever gripped his body. No shadow chased him. The world seemed indifferent to his audacity. The boy sat up, feeling the strange weight of disbelief pressing against his chest. He had expected punishment, imagined it, feared it. Yet here he was, alive and unharmed. He began to realize something. Perhaps the gods were not watching as closely as everyone said. Perhaps their stories were only stories, meant to frighten children and keep them in line. Perhaps they were not gods at all, only carved wood and ancient smoke. But even as he entertained the thought, a whisper of doubt lingered. The gods might be silent now, but what if their wrath came later? What if it waited, patient and terrible, to strike him down years from now? Still, the ache of hunger was stronger than fear. That night, for the first time, he slept deeply. Not from safety, not from relief, but from the strange, intoxicating certainty that the gods had not punished him. And in that quiet, the boy began to imagine the impossible. That perhaps, in all his life of hunger and fear, he had found a loophole no one else could claim. The very next market day, the boy returned to the shrine. Hunger had grown sharper, more insistent, but now curiosity and boldness accompanied it. He had learned from the nights of waiting that the gods remained silent, and that knowledge strengthened him more than any stolen meal could. From the edge of the clearing, he watched the villagers approach. Women carried yams and fowl, their steps careful and measured, children trailing behind in whispered obedience. The men followed, chanting quietly, the elders' white chalk marks glowing faintly in the morning sun. He observed everything. Which tray held the freshest yams, which chicken glistened most with oil, which bowl of palm wine had been poured just enough to overflow slightly. He memorized the movements of the priest, noting the exact moment the hands were lifted and the declaration made. When the villagers departed, leaving the shrine and its offerings unguarded, he stepped forward. His heart thumped against his chest, not with fear, but with anticipation. The carved gods seemed taller than ever, their hollow eyes staring down as if daring him to proceed. He reached for the food. His fingers brushed the roasted yams first, warm and fragrant, then hesitated over a piece of fowl. His hand shook as he lifted it, testing the limits of his newfound courage. A small sip of palm wine followed, sweet and bitter on his tongue. For the first time, he lingered in the shrine, moving slowly, daring to glance at the gods' faces, studying their carved expressions. He even whispered under his breath, a quiet challenge to the silent deities. "You do nothing. You have no power here. I am alive." When he finally left, he did not run as before. Instead, he walked carefully, glancing back only once, his chest swelling with a strange mix of triumph and disbelief. That night, he expected punishment. But once again, nothing happened. The wind whispered through the trees. A lone bird called. The earth was still. "No signis, no sado, no de vainras." The boy lay under his usual tree, stomach full, and for the first time, he felt a new sensation creeping into his chest. A quiet, daring confidence. If the gods did nothing now, perhaps they never would. And with that thought, he began to imagine a life where hunger no longer ruled him. A life where fear could be ignored. A life where he, for once, was in control. Weeks turned into months, and the boy grew bolder. What had once been a trembling, cautious venture into the shrine became a ritual of daring for him. He no longer crouched at the edge of the clearing, hesitant and fearful. He walked straight to the threshold, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the silent gods. At first, he still took only what he needed: yams to fill his stomach, a small piece of chicken, a sip of palm wine. But over time, he began to linger, sitting cross-legged on the earthen floor, savoring the offerings with a strange, quiet joy. He would look at the carved figures and mutter to himself, testing the limits of his audacity. "You cannot eat, can you? Or are you too slow?" The wooden gods remained still. Their hollow eyes did not move. Their mouths did not speak. Nothing stirred in the thick, incense-laden air. The boy began to experiment. He rearranged the trays, compared the yams and fowl, even touched the sacred kola nuts lightly. With each small act, his fear diminished. Each stolen meal reinforced the quiet truth he was beginning to understand. The gods did not act. They did not punish. They did not care. Outside, the village carried on as usual. The priest chanted. The elders blessed the offerings. The women whispered among themselves. None suspected the silent boy who lingered inside the shrine, eating what was never meant to be his. He discovered a strange rhythm. He could sense when the villagers would leave, when the priest would call the last chant, when the offerings would be unguarded. Hunger had sharpened his senses, and now boldness sharpened his mind. Sometimes he would pause, gaze at the towering figures, and imagine them as what they truly were. Nothing more than carved wood, old smoke, and stories told to frighten children. He laughed softly, almost aloud, at the audacity of it all. And still nothing happened. No thunder, no fire, no illness, no whisper of wrath, only silence. With each passing day, his fear faded completely. Hunger had brought him to the shrine, but boldness kept him there. He had crossed the threshold once, and now he was learning to own it. The boy without a name was no longer a child trembling in fear. He was a young master of the forbidden, a shadow moving freely where everyone else saw only sacred ground. And in that freedom, he felt a power he had never known before, the power to take what he needed and to defy the world without consequence. The seasons came and went, yet the boy continued his secret visits to the shrine. Years passed, and the small, ragged child grew into a lean, strong young man. Hunger, which had once defined every thought and movement, now existed only as a distant memory he could satisfy at will. No one knew where he went. Villagers noticed his surprising strength, the way his stomach never seemed empty, and the way his cheeks grew fuller while others' faces remained sharp and gaunt. Some admired him quietly, others whispered suspicion. Yet none could uncover the secret that he alone carried. He moved with the precision of someone who had long studied the rhythms of the village, the timing of the priest's chants, the habits of the elders, the moments when the offerings were unguarded. Each step was deliberate, each action calculated. Inside the shrine, he learned to read the space. He knew which yams were softest, which fowl were roasted to perfection, which bowls of palm wine overflowed just enough to taste like the gods themselves had poured them. He lingered in the shadows, stretching the boundaries of daring, and often muttered, half to himself, half to the silent gods, "You see me, yet do nothing. You are nothing." Years of this routine hardened him in ways no one could imagine. He no longer trembled or whispered. He entered the shrine as if it were his own home, as though the carved figures were guests and he, their master. Still, the world outside remained unchanged. Villagers continued their rituals, trusting in the power of the gods, unaware that the true eater of the offerings was a nameless boy who had become a young man. Sometimes, at night, he would lie beneath a familiar tree and watch the stars, feeling a quiet satisfaction. No one had caught him, no one had punished him, and the gods remained silent. It was a delicate balance, a life built on secrecy, audacity, and the slow mastery of fear. The boy without a name had become something else entirely, a shadow that moved through the sacred and the profane with equal ease, invisible and untouchable, yet thriving where others faltered. And yet, the question lingered in the back of his mind, though he dared not speak it aloud. If the gods have watched all these years and done nothing, what does that truly mean? The villagers began to notice small things. How could a boy with no home, no farm, and no trade survive so well? His body was strong, his cheeks rounded, his stomach never empty. The boy without a name, now a young man, realized that in the quiet, unbroken silence of the gods, he had discovered something extraordinary: freedom. Freedom from hunger, freedom from fear, freedom from the invisible chains that bound every other villager. And in that freedom, he found a dangerous thought creeping into his mind. If they do nothing now, will they ever? For the first time, he wondered whether the gods were not absent, not silent, but entirely powerless. And that realization made him smile. One evening, as the sun sank behind the distant hills and painted the forest edge in gold and shadow, the boy, now a young man, sat cross-legged before the largest deity in the shrine. Its carved face, taller and more imposing than any he had ever seen, seemed to stare back at him with an unwavering stillness. For years, he had eaten the offerings, tested the limits of fear, and ignored the warnings of the village. And yet, here he was, alive, untouched, unpunished. A strange feeling stirred within him, a mixture of audacity and curiosity. He leaned forward, palms pressed to the warm earth, and spoke aloud for the first time to the gods themselves. "Why do you do nothing?" he asked. His voice echoed softly against the mud walls. "I have taken what is yours. I have lingered. I have tested you. And still, nothing. Why?" The shrine remained silent. The incense curled slowly in the dim light. The carved figures offered no answer, no movement, no acknowledgement. Only the quiet hum of the village beyond the forest reached him, distant and unconnected. He stood and walked around the deity, circling it as if to provoke a response. He touched the bowls, rearranged the yams, even tasted a piece of kola nut, letting the silence stretch like a living thing between him and the supposed divine. "You see me," he said, stepping back. "You have seen me for years. You have watched me take your food. And yet, you do nothing. Are you blind? Are you weak? Or are you nothing at all?" The young man laughed, a low, almost defiant sound that seemed to fill the shadows. He waited. Minutes passed. Hours passed. Still nothing stirred. For the first time, he considered the possibility that the god's power had been a story, a warning, a tale meant to control those too afraid to test it. Perhaps the offerings were never for them at all. Perhaps the rituals, the fear, the belief, it had all been for the villagers, not the deities. And yet, in that realization, a new kind of courage blossomed. He understood now that his survival, his freedom, and his audacity had all been forged in silence. No one had seen, no one had punished, and the gods had remained still. It was a truth both frightening and exhilarating. For the first time, he walked out of the shrine not as a thief, but as someone who had uncovered a secret no one else dared to imagine. The gods, feared by all, had done nothing, and maybe they never would. Years passed, and the young man's audacity became almost legendary, though the villagers had no idea why. They whispered about the boy without a name, now a man, who never seemed hungry, never suffered, and never asked for anything. They wondered if he had charms, or if some hidden favor had been granted to him by the gods themselves. The elders speculated quietly. "He is favored," one said, leaning on his staff, eyes narrowing as he observed the young man move through the village. "He must have a spirit protecting him. How else could he thrive without toil?" Others shook their heads, uneasy. "Perhaps he walks with misfortune yet unseen," warned another. "Or perhaps he carries a curse we cannot see." The young man, however, had his own secret. No charm protected him. No spirit watched over him. He had stepped outside of their belief, outside of their fear, outside of the invisible boundaries that shaped their world. And in doing so, he left the shrine behind, not as a thief escaping punishment, but as a man who had tested the unknown and found only silence. Years passed like drifting smoke, soft and ungraspable. The boy without a name became a man with a life, one that no longer depended on shadows or stolen offerings. He left the village quietly, without farewell or announcement, as though he had never truly belonged there in the first place. Beyond the forest, beyond the red earth paths and whispering trees, he found a different world. A world where no one knew Yulo Muo. A world where no one feared carved wood or silent gods. He worked, he struggled, he survived. At first it felt strange. Earning food with his hands, waiting for meals, living like everyone else. There were days hunger returned, faint but familiar, and in those moments, memories of the shrine would surface uninvited. The neatly arranged yams, the untouched bowls, the silence that had once fed him. But he never went back. Never. He built a life slowly. A small hut became a home. A lonely existence became a family. A nameless boy became a man people recognized, spoke to, even respected. And yet, some nights refused to let him forget. In the deep hours, when the world lay quiet and even the insects softened their songs, he would lie awake, staring into the darkness. Not afraid, not guilty, just thinking. The question always returned. Not loud, not urgent, but persistent. What did it mean? He had stolen from the gods for years. Not once, not twice, but countless times. He had mocked them, challenged them, stood before them and demanded answers. And still, nothing had happened. No curse followed him. No misfortune clung to his shadow. No hidden price revealed itself with time. He lived. He breathed. He grew old. One evening, as he sat outside his home watching the sky fade into night, his child came to him holding a small piece of food. "Father," the child asked innocently, "why do people give food to the gods?" The question struck him deeper than any fear ever had. For a moment he said nothing. His eyes drifted far away, past the present, past the years, back to a small, hungry boy standing at the edge of a forbidden shrine. He remembered the trembling, the first bite, the long nights of waiting for punishment, the silence, always the silence. He looked at his child and gave a small, thoughtful smile. "People believe," he said slowly, "that some things must be given even if nothing takes them." The child frowned slightly, confused. "But what if no one eats it?" The man paused, a long pause. Then he looked up at the darkening sky, his expression unreadable. "Then," he said quietly, "maybe it was never about the eating." The wind passed gently, carrying no answers, only the familiar hush of a world that continued without explanation. Far away, in the village he once knew, the shrine still stood. The villagers still brought offerings. The priests still chanted. The gods still watched. And the food still lay there waiting, untouched. Or perhaps, not by gods. The man leaned back, closing his eyes, not in fear, not in regret, but in acceptance of something he had come to understand without ever fully explaining. Some questions do not come with answers. Some truths do not reveal themselves with time. And sometimes, nothing happens. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share, and subscribe.